What's up, everybody? It's Josh. Welcome back to the channel. So, Marvel's What If episode 1 is here. I just watched the episode, sort of collected my thoughts, broke down a few things, and I'm going to talk about that in this video. This is sort of just my raw reaction and thoughts about this episode of What If, how this sets up the rest of What If, and I want to just kind of get this off of my chest right away and sort of frame the video this way. I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was great. I think it serviced all the things that I wanted a What If episode to do, and I think it sets us up for a brilliant rest of the season. However, I can acknowledge that from what I've seen early online with people talking about this, that yes, it does seem to be a little bit divided. There are some people out there being negative, particularly about the length and the pacing of the episode, and just not thinking that it did enough for them. And I will address that because although I disagree, I do understand that that's a thing. But I mean, when you've got jokes as good as "Who ordered the calamari?" how could you not be having a good time? So, this being Marvel's first animated show and the first show that's going to be, going into what if alternate versions of the MCU that we love, there's a lot of different things just on fans' minds, but I think it's all contingent upon the animation itself. How good's the animation? Will we be able to accept this as MCU content? Will that thing sort of happen in our mind that often happens with Star Wars animated shows, where we sort of forget that we're watching animation? We just go to the Star Wars universe. Is it going to be that, or is it going to be very like stark and clunky? I mean, we knew we were in for sort of this cel-shaded kind of animation, and we, maybe some of us had concerns about that being clunky. I know for me personally, I was like, okay, I'm down with this kind of animation, but how good is it going to look when it's actually fully animated? And, the trailers are a good indication, but when you're actually watching dialogue, the animation has to be able to carry not just the fun, action-y parts of the show, but the slower parts of the show that just has dialogue, the different scenes like that. So you need the animation to work on different levels. And for me, I felt like the animation in What If was brilliant. It looks way better when being animated than it does in any still shot, and I just think it does just have something going on with the way it's animated, especially on a really nice screen that looks fluid to me. There's no clunkiness, so that is really good. And I feel like the character designs and the modeling that's done in the episode feels very MCU to me. This felt like the characters that I knew from Captain America, the first Avenger movie, and it just, it totally draws you in. I didn't have any complaints about the animation itself. In fact, for me, a little bit surprising how much I liked it, how good it seemed to flow, and it almost creates this sort of a vibe that's very familiar in the cinematic sense, but yet also somehow really familiar to Marvel Comics. It's kind of magical the way that this animation comes together. For me, totally works for the episode. Really important, and so fundamentally solid. But obviously animation is just animation without writing, without good story. You can't really latch onto this at all, and it's not going to feel connected to the MCU. So how was the overall story? Well, I felt, again, that it was pretty strong, stronger than maybe I would have even anticipated. I mean, we knew Peggy Carter was going to get into that machine. She was going to be injected with the super soldier serum. She was going to become Captain Carter. We just weren't sure exactly how that was going to go down. I felt like the way in which it played out made sense. It keeps all of the characters intact. It keeps their sort of motivations intact and takes us to basically just a different outcome. And I felt like what they did with Peggy becoming the super soldier and there being some flack and pushback from especially the military with regards to that, I felt like it was all handled really, really well. Now, obviously, her being a woman, it's going to bring certain things with it. People weren't necessarily feeling that, especially back in that time period. But even in modern times, you can run the risk of that kind of messaging being sort of heavy-handed or feeling too, weirdly out of context. But to me, this felt totally fair, totally organic. I felt like it made a lot of sense. And then moving forward throughout the story, it was fun to see how the different characters approach what was a familiar plot, again, because of Captain America, the First Avenger, that MCU movie, but it was fun to see that plot approach with sort of just new twists on those old and familiar elements. Steve is still trying to save Bucky, obsessed with Bucky, and yet he's still really selfless and, not exactly the most brilliant person. So that aspect of his character intact. I didn't feel like Steve got the shaft in this episode. Like, if anything, no. Like, it's still totally Steve Rogers, and the fact that he gets the Hydra Stomper and does some serious damage in combat, I thought was really cool and a fun little, like, sort of throw a dog a bone situation to a character that everybody loves. I mean, we all love Steve Rogers. In fact, Captain Carter being awesome is sort of even predicated on the fact that she knows and loves Steve Rogers as well. That aspect of it was really cool, but of course, Peggy is well established as well. She's headstrong, but she still has her own fiery kind of moments off the beaten path, not like Steve would do it kind of moments. And so for me, even though it's familiar, we know Peggy's a good person, we know that she's on the right side of things, and she's really headstrong, but seeing that now with her with the super soldier serum and dealing with what, conflict and elements are brought because of that, I felt like it was satisfying, and the story to me was very good. It made sense. It wasn't too crazy where I get lost in thinking about how things would shake out. And yet it's distinct enough to have its own feel and be a very cool piece of time and canon in the MCU. I like Captain Carter. I'm excited to see her moving forward. But now let's talk about context. Let's talk about connective tissue. Let's talk about that Marvel love, right? That MCU shine, that thing that we're all really here for. And I think that's ultimately where some fans are not loving the show. They don't necessarily think that What If Episode 1 lives up to that MCU level of hype, that it sets us up for something that they're really going to look forward to for the next 8 weeks. And with all the hype about Captain Carter and some of the other characters we might meet in What If showing up in live action and perhaps even being a large part of what Kevin Feige wants to do with future MCU multiversal stuff, maybe some Marvel fans were looking for a bit more. And I did see, again, as I talked about earlier on in the video, a lot of fans saying it just moved too fast for me. It was too montagey. I really wanted to live more in that world with Captain Carter, and I wish the episode was like 15 minutes longer with more elements spread out throughout. And while I can acknowledge that there are a couple of really fast kind of time jumps or, leaps ahead within the structure of this episode, I ultimately want to sort of defend that structure because to me, this aspect of the Peggy Carter, Captain Carter character is likely to be the least interesting aspect of that character. And in general, I do think that this will be the least interesting episode of the whole series. So when it comes to the character of Captain Carter, this is her jumping off point. What she does from here and how she's going to interact with the rest of these characters and perhaps the rest of the MCU multiverse, that's where I think a lot of the juice is going to come from with this character. However, you do need to establish not only the idea of what if is to your mainstream audiences, but you need to establish Captain Carter as that sort of core element. And because of her connection to Steve Rogers and the Captain America that we all know and love from the MCU, that is really our connection to Captain Carter and the way by which many fans will come to just acknowledge that character and have their connection to that character. So it's very, very central, but it's not actually ultimately going to be that unique of a thing. Even this episode, for all the fun that we had, for all the crazy twists, and whether or not that was Shuma Gorath or not, that was crazy, right? Like Red Skull bringing in some crazy multiversal thing that to me, I still think is Shuma, but might have been one of the many angled ones or whatever. Regardless, let's not get too sweaty. For the purposes of this video, what I'm saying was that was super freaking crazy and fun, but even that is still something you can kind of see coming. You can see as an element to that Captain America, the First Avenger movie, and we do generally move right through the plot of that film to get to its ending and then its post-credits scene where you see Captain Carter brought into the modern times with Hawkeye and Nick Fury, Sam Jackson, Nick Fury. So it's like, it's doing a lot to sort of take you to a place that now we're going to see that character move on in adventures. And I just kind of say to the people that wanted more, it's like, did you really want to hang out more in sort of that more contrived, you can kind of see it coming part of her story? To me, like, knowing that that's the way it was going to go, it somehow lowered my expectations, because I was like, okay, well, yeah, we know kind of what's going to happen in this episode, but also like made me okay with sort of rapidly moving through that plot to get to where we are now. I don't know. That's just kind of my thoughts on it. So I acknowledge that some Marvel fans might be like, hey, just wasn't enough for me, wasn't quite what I was looking for. Totally fair. But to the people that are saying like, hey man, I wanted way more, the pacing was whack, it moved too fast, I again argue that this episode is really here to bring us into this world, show us what this is all going to be like, establish to mainstream audiences what the concept actually is, and then kind of get the ball rolling on what's to come. So for me, I'm totally okay with it. Thought it was great, actually, and I'm super pumped for what is coming. Let me know your thoughts about this. I will be doing a stream today, Wednesday, of the release of What If at noon Eastern Standard Time. Full-on spoilers talking about the episode. If you got some gripes, if you got some questions, bring them over to that stream. It should be a very good time. And yeah, I'm going to get out here again. Let me know your thoughts about the show in the comment section below. As I always say, I hope you're having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.